Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me James Roosevelt Jr., otherwise known as Jim, who is a longtime healthcare leader, former Associate Commissioner of Social Security for Retirement Policy, and grandson of FDR, as well as advisory board member for Pluri Inc, a biotech transforming cells into solutions to promote well-being and sustainability. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Nicole. Great to be with you.
So, amid historic advances in cell-based therapies and precision medicine, biotech's biggest challenge isn't scientific, it's political. And today, Jim and I will be discussing regulatory bottlenecks and their stalling effect on cell-based therapies, as well as the real dynamics behind FDA reform and why biotech CEOs must become more fluent in policy making now. To begin with, though, Jim, perhaps you could introduce yourself a little for listeners and provide some background to what you do today, your journey, if you will, including, I believe it was a decade as CEO of Tufts Health Plan.
Well, I've been a healthcare lawyer for many years, starting actually in the late 1970s, when we still called it hospital law. We hadn't thought of the term healthcare law yet, but been doing it a long time in private practice, representing a variety of entities from providers to payers to clinics and manufacturers. I moved to the government for a period of time as Associate Commissioner of Social Security in the role of Associate Commissioner for Retirement Policy, which is really strategic planning for the future of the program. And in that area, we, along with the actuaries, take into account how the economy has changed, how life expectancy has changed, how prospective drug developments will change and affect the long-term participation in Social Security. When I returned from that Washington assignment, I was for 5.5 years general counsel at Tufts Health Plan. Tufts Health Plan was the second largest health plan in Massachusetts after Blue Cross of Massachusetts. More recently, it has combined with Harvard Pilgrim Health Plan to form Point 32 Health, which is actually the same size as Blue Cross of Massachusetts. We developed the company in ways that made that combination possible. But Tufts Health Plan was a wonderful organization to be affiliated with because during the time that I was general counsel and then CEO for 10.5 years as CEO, we worked our way to the number one rankings by every public measure in quality, in customer satisfaction, and in outcomes for our members. So it was great to be part of a leading organization like that. Since I left Tufts Health Plan in 2017, I've been back in private practice and represent a variety of, once again, a variety of people, whether they are patients or manufacturers or insurers or providers, and their healthcare needs and their broader needs for retirement income.
Thank you, Jim. As you say, quite a wide remit there, both at the beginning of your career and these latter days. So let's kick off this podcast's main discussion. And let's begin with the question, why is it that the most promising biotech innovations are stuck in outdated frameworks? What can you tell us about that, Jim?
Well, we've got a regulatory infrastructure that is designed for what we've historically dealt with in drug approval, which are small molecule and linear research and development pathways. Cell therapies, especially allogenic and placenta-based ones, challenge these conventions. They are living drugs. They're dynamic, they're complex, and they're often sourced from biological material that was once considered medical waste. And the framework for assessing their safety and effectiveness hasn't really caught up. So innovators have to retrofit their mechanism for a revolutionary science into obsolete categories.
That's quite a task, which is no doubt why we're in the predicament that we're in, Jim. So thank you for sort of outlining the round peg going in the square hole, as it were, of these living drugs to an outdated infrastructure. So if we sort of shift perspective now, in what way can bipartisan interest in healthcare reform or offer a narrow window for progress in this situation?
Well, I think everyone is coming to realize, and this is politically bipartisan, but also scientifically on both sides of the research and development aisle, that the current system doesn't work fast enough to get transformative therapies to patients. Whether it's veterans health or rare disease access or pandemic preparedness, which we now know we should always be thinking of, there are pockets of consensus around faster approvals and expanded access, but that's a narrow, even if it's meaningful, it's a narrow window for reform, especially when we're dealing with regenerative medicine and cell therapy, where unmet needs are particularly important.
Thank you. So if we think about this word preparedness more generally and expanding out of pandemic preparedness, what must biotech executives understand about navigating Congress or CMS or the FDA to bring these therapies to market at this challenging and transformative time in order to get this acceleration of access, the literal treatment to the patient?
Well, this is something where I have a particular view as a longtime healthcare lawyer. As I've mentioned, I've seen the field of healthcare law and indeed, of course, of healthcare itself evolve over quite a few years to where we even use different terminology now than we used when I started working in this field. Biotech executives need to recognize that innovation alone isn't enough. It's the old story of, if I do a good job, everyone will applaud and I'll be successful. No, you have to have pathways developed. So you have to understand the reimbursement dynamics at CMS and with private health plans. And you have to understand how the Food and Drug Administration evaluates risk. For example, you might develop a therapy with outstanding safety data, but without a reimbursement code or coverage pathway, it never reaches patients. Biotech leaders have to be able to communicate science in the language of policy, the language of economics, and the language of patient need. They can't wait until phase 3 of drug approval to engage with CMS, FDA, and private insurers.
Thank you, Jim. So if we got on to this word pathways, there is the pathways issue very much so as you've been describing, and the need to communicate in language of policy, economics, and patient need. But there's also the issue, of course, of public trust. And why is it that public trust and not just data will be a defining factor in biotech's next era?
Well, in my opinion, we're in an era of skepticism overall. Skepticism about government, skepticism about performance in sports, and skepticism in the medical area, whether it's dealing with vaccines or gene editing or other concepts that people are not fully comfortable with yet. So public trust becomes an important part of the infrastructure of access to healthcare. Therapies derived from sources like placentas or stem cells may have cultural or ethical implications for many people. Companies have to have more than just peer-reviewed papers, which the average person is not going to read. They need narratives of transparency, narratives of access, and narratives of the benefit to actual patients. For instance, using postpartum placentas to develop off-the-shelf cell therapies, as Pluri does, resonates because it repurposes medical waste into medical hope, not medical controversy.
What a great statement. Would you like to repeat that for our listeners, Jim?
I will. As we explain to people what is going on with things like stem cell therapy and show them how they actually help people, we come across with a real life example of how something like postpartum use leads to off-the-shelf therapies that resonate because it repurposes medical waste into hope, not controversy.
There you go, listeners. Hope, not controversy. So my last question today, Jim, do you have any closing remarks besides these for our listeners today that they can ponder as this conversation comes to a close.
So I want to try to get specific in the closing here. At the Food and Drug Administration, we need clearer guidance for regenerative medicine and a streamlined path for low immunogenic, off-the-shelf therapies. At CMS, we have to explore provisional reimbursement mechanisms that allow therapies to be covered while long-term effectiveness data matures. This requires developing relationships at each of these portions of government before we're asking for specific approvals. We need to have relationships so that there is trust, first of all, between the industry and the regulators, and then trust between the regulators, the healthcare industry, and patients and providers.
I think that says it all. Thank you very much for your time today, Jim. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure for me as well, Nicole. Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your other podcasts from. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.